mountain, which is Mount Everest. Verse 21 says, and all the flesh died that moved on the earth, birds and cattle and beasts and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth, and every man, all in whose nostril was the breath of life. All that was on dry land died. So he destroyed all living things which were on the face of the ground, both man and cattle, creeping things, birds of the air. They were destroyed from the earth. Circle this. Only Noah, circle this, only Noah and those who were with him in the ark remained alive, and the waters prevailed on the earth 150 days. Circle that. That gives you a time period. Their time period starts over in chapter 7, verse 11, and you've given a reference point of time in verse 24 of how long the waters prevail on the earth, 150 days. Chapter 8. Then Yahweh, or Elohim rather, remembered Noah and every living thing and all the animals that were with him in the ark. And Elohim made a wind to pass over the earth, and the waters subsided. The fountains of the great deep and the windows of heaven were stopped, and the rain from heaven was restrained. And the waters receded continuously from the earth. At the end of 150 days, the waters decreased. Reference point. The ark rested. Reference point. The ark rested. The ark rested in the 7th month, the 17th day of the month, on the mountains of Ararat. Let's stop there. Reagan. What's the Hebrew 7th month? Anyone? All right. We are in the Hebrew 6th month. The 6th Hebrew month is Alu. Alu. Alu is followed by the Hebrew 7th month. And the ancient phrase for that Hebrew 7th month, or name rather, is Tishri. Tishri. When we were in Babylon, we renamed it Ethanim. Ethanim. Its ancient name is Tishri. Tishri is the 7th month. On the 7th month, on the first day of our 7th month, is the memorial blowing of the trumpets. You will find this in Leviticus chapter 23, Leviticus chapter 23, and you would read about the Feast of the Trumpets in Leviticus chapter 23, verse 23, 24, and 25. It begins on our 7th month, on the first day of the 7th month. Leviticus 23, 26 through verse 32 will teach you about Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. The Day of Atonement. And on our 7th month, beginning on the 15th day of the 7th month, in Leviticus chapter 23, verses 33 through 44, is the Feast of the Tabernacles. Feast of the Tabernacles. So, when the ark comes to rest in the 4th verse of the 8th chapter, it rests on the 7th month, Tishri, on the 17th day of the month, which is the 2nd day of the Feast of the Ingathering, or called Tabernacles. That is a sign for you. Verse 5. The waters decreased continuously until the 10th month. And in the 10th month, on the first day of the month, that's a new moon, the tops of the mountains were seen. So it came to pass at the end of 40 days that Noah opened the window of the ark which he had made. So if you're counting with me, you are now physically going into the Hebrew 11th month. Then he sent out a raven which kept going to and fro until the waters had dried up on the earth. He also sent out for himself a dove to see if the waters had receded from the face of the ground. But the dove found no resting place for the sole of her foot, and she returned into the ark, for the waters were on the face of the whole earth. But he put out his hand, and he took her, and he drew her into the ark itself. Question: why did he send out a raven first? What was the raven looking for? Why a raven?
Bodies.
Say again?
Was it looking for bodies?
Absolutely. A raven is a scavenger bird. It's a carrion. And a carrion-type bird, or birds that like carrion, usually sit down upon it, eat its flesh because it has bloated on the face or the surface of the water. And the raven didn't come back. Why didn't it come back?
Because it found food.
Absolutely. Very good point, Sarah. So Noah's like, all right, there's folks still floating out there on some water. Just being real with you. Let me try this one here. I'm going to send out a dove. Why a dove? Don't be afraid. Nobody. Just think about it. Noah knew that if all flesh had been drowned, right, that when a person drowns, they don't immediately go to the bottom. They actually float on the top because their body bloats. And so he sends out the raven. Raven's smart enough to, A, come back if there's nothing out there, but B, if there is something out there, it stays. So it apparently stayed because there was something out there. But if there was something out there, that means that, the waters had not completely, dried up. So now, if they were already vegan, what were they looking for? Come on.
Vegetation.
They were looking for vegetation. So I'm going to send out a dove because doves eat vegetation. And Noah's job was that of a farmer. So if he's sending out a dove and he's a farmer, he knows the nature of the dove. The dove, if it finds vegetation, it's going to do what? Come back.
Okay.
Right. So let's read on. Verse 9. But the dove found no resting place for the sole of her foot, and she returned into the ark, for the waters were on the face of the whole earth. So, wasn't no vegetation the first time he sent it out. So he put out his hand, took her in, and drew her into the ark himself. Then he waited another 7 days. That's a Shabbat. Sheva, the Hebrew word that is there is Sheva. Yom Sheva. He waited another 7 days. And again, he sent the dove out of the ark. Then the dove came back to him in the evening, the beginning of a new day, and behold, a freshly plucked olive leaf was in her mouth. And Noah knew that the waters had receded from the earth. So he waited yet another Yom Sheva, 7 days, and sent out the dove, which did not return again to him anymore. Highlight, underline, write in your margin, put your reference notes down on verse 13. It came to pass in the 601 year, the 601st year, in the first month, on the first day of the month, that the waters were dried up from the earth. And Noah removed the covering of the ark and looked, and indeed the surface of the ground was dry. Stop. Take your finger. Turn to the book of Exodus with me. We are going to the book of Exodus, the second book of the law. Let me know when you get there. And I am waiting on you. Here we go. Exodus chapter 12, verse 2. This month shall be your beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. Stop. Verse 18. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month, at evening you shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month at evening. Back over to verse 2. This month shall be the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. Turn now. Exodus chapter 13, verse 4. Exodus 13, verse 4. It says, on this day you are going out in the month of Abib. Stop. Our Exodus was in the month of Abib. Abib is the first month of the Hebrew year. We are told in the Torah, taught in the scriptures, that the first month, that is the beginning of months to us, is Abib, as verse 2 of the 12th chapter of Exodus. If you turn back to Genesis, chapter 8, verse 13, it came to pass in the 601st year Noah's birthday or born day was in the month of Abib. The new moon was when they came where? To the door of the ark to exit it because the ground was dry. That's Abib. It is the Hebrew year of release. It is the Hebrew year of liberation. And it is what we would call real Happy New Year. Because guess what? Life just began all over again. The human family is about to emerge from an ark. They've been on it for about a year. Verse 14 says, in the second month, on the 27th day of the month, the whole earth was dry. That's the month of Ayah. So that is now a complete period of time that has gone by. A whole cycle has gone by. Verse 15, and Elohim spoke to Noah, saying, go out of the ark, you, your wife, your sons, and your sons' wives. Bring out with you every living thing of all flesh that is with you, birds, cattle, every creeping thing that creeps on the earth, so that they may be abound on the earth and be fruitful and multiply upon the earth. So Noah went out, his son, his wife, his sons' wives with him. Every animal, every creeping thing, every bird, and everything that creeps on the earth according to their families went out of the ark. And Noah built an altar to Yah and took every clean animal and every clean bird and offered burnt offerings on the altar. This is the first official sacrifice of any human on the face of the earth. This is the first sacrifice of any human being that is recorded in the scriptures. The first sacrifice we know, if we go back to the Genesis, that Yah made when he took the skin and put them upon Adam and Eve to cover them. Something had to die because there was some sin present. So now there's a sacrifice that's made here. And the book says in verse 21, and Yahweh smelled a smooth, soothing aroma. Then Yahweh said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground for man's sake, although the imagination of his heart is evil from his youth. Nor will I again destroy every living thing as I have done. Here is a promise. While the earth remains seed, time, and harvest. So that's the spring and that's the autumn. Cold and heat, winter and summer, day and night shall not cease. That's a promise the Creator gave, that there would be perpetual seed time and harvest, that there would be perpetual seasonal change. That is a reference of a promise to the perpetuity of a seasonal change. Seed time, harvest, cold and heat, winter and summer, day and night shall not cease. Chapter 9, the book of Genesis. Bear with me. We're almost there. Thank you for your attentiveness. Greatly appreciate it. And hang on if you got questions because we're going to get to them. Just bear with me. Chapter 9. Read from this slide. And Elohim blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth. Note this. The fear of you and the dread of you should be on every beast of the earth and of every bird of the air and of all that moves on the earth and all the fish of the sea. They are given into your hand. Every moving thing that lives shall be food for you. I have given you all things, even as the green herbs. Now, what just happened here between Genesis 1, 2, and 3? Somebody else help me out here. Tell me what happened in Genesis verse 1, 2, and 3 of the 9th chapter. Don't be shy.
We're no longer vegans, so vegetarians.
Okay. Go ahead. Say that again, Soraya.
Before we were vegans, they were vegans, and now meat is introduced into their diet.
Okay, so Soraya says, and I agree with her, I agree that the scripture says that prior to this event, the entire human family, right, that was of this righteous line were vegan. So there's no consumption of flesh in this Noahic line. And now the Creator permits something. The fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth, bird of the air, and on all that moves on the earth. Animals did not have a fear of us before this. It says, they are given into your hand. Every moving thing that lives shall be food for you. I have given you all things, even as the green herbs. Now watch what he says, though. Now, since flesh is not permitted to be consumed or permitted to be eaten, there's a provision. But you shall not eat flesh with its life. Circle that. We just had this conversation. Circle that. Its life. That is its blood. You shall not eat flesh with its life. That is its blood. Stop. Let's turn to the book of Leviticus, chapter 17, in the Torah, verse 11 and verse 14. Leviticus, chapter 17, verse 11 and 14. Leviticus, chapter 17, verse 11 and 14. And it says unto you, it begins at verse 10, for you, O house of Israel, it says, whatever man of the house of Israel or of the strangers who dwell among you who eats blood, any blood, I will set my face against that person who eats blood and will cut him off from among your people or his people. Why? Verse 11. For the life of the flesh is in its blood, and I have given it to you upon the altar to make atonement for your souls. For it is the blood that makes atonement for your souls. Therefore I say to the children of Israel, no one among you shall eat blood, nor any stranger who dwells among you eat blood. Whatever man of the children of Israel or the stranger who dwells among you who hunts and catches any animal or bird that may be eaten, he shall pour out its blood and cover it with dust. For it is the life of all flesh. Its blood sustains its life. Therefore I say to the children of Israel, you shall not eat blood of any flesh, for the life of all flesh is in its blood, and whoever eats it shall be cut off. Now, though the Creator permitted the consumption of flesh, there are provisions that we as Israelites need to uphold. You know, because the Israelite community is diverse. You know, you got some who eat meat. You know, and if you eat meat, then eat your meat. If you eat meat, make sure that you're eating organic meat. Make sure that you're eating the leanest meat possible. And if you're eating fish, make sure that you're eating according to the standards of Leviticus 11 and Deuteronomy chapter 14. That your fish must have fins and scales. Your fish must have fins and scales. No catfish. No shrimp. No lobster. Your days of going to Red Lobster are over. Don't let me catch you there. But on a serious note, those are scavengers. All right, so you got to eat things according to Leviticus 11, 1 through 44, Deuteronomy chapter 14, the beginning verses to the end. That is a reiteration of Leviticus 11, the dietary law, the dietary code, the dietary instructions of Yahweh are there. But if one consumes flesh, which means that I am not endorsing you consuming flesh, nor am I condemning you for your choice of consumed flesh, except that you don't eat no pork. except that you don't eat no catfish, except that you don't eat anything with fins only or scales only. Your seafood has to have fins and scales, according to how it's written. And this law precipitated, meaning that law that I'm going with, deals with the law of how you kill your meat if you eat it and how you are to prepare it. So you take it, turn it upside down, you slit it under the throat, you slit it under each one of its limbs, because that's where the arteries are, and then you turn it upside down or invert it, and you let it bleed out. You know, there's some folks that eat meat, and I want my meat rare. Really? No. Not among the children of Israel. Please don't eat no rare meat. You don't eat no medium rare meat. Rare will cause you not only to lose your hair, it will cause you to be the recipient of disease, pollutants, toxins, and all types of worms. You can get sick from eating that meat. And, beloved, over a long period of time of eating red meat, you will become sick because it's harder to digest. It sits in your lower intestines for 90 hours and begins to putrefy. So you don't want to eat meat. It hardens and restricts your arteries and your veins. You want to eat clean, live food, not dead food. And that which most of us eat amongst our people is that which we have killed, or not we killed, others have killed, and we consume. So we want to eat live food. Because why? It prolongs our life. It will prolong our health. And we will live longer, and we will serve the Creator better, and we'll have better health and better relationships if we eat a more holistic diet that not just is in the Noahic time, but the times that preceded Noah. Let's go to verse 5 of the 9th chapter as we begin to wind this down. Surely for your life I will demand a reckoning from the hand of every beast. I will require it, and from the hand of man, and from the hand of every the life of man. Verse 6, whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed. For in the image of Elohim he made man. As for you, be fruitful, multiply, bring forth abundantly in the earth, multiply in it. And Elohim spoke to Noah and to his sons with him, saying, and as for me, behold, I will establish my covenant with you and with your descendants after you, and with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the cattle, every beast of the earth with you, and all that go out of the ark, every beast of the earth. Highlight, underline, circle, make a note. Verse 11. Thus I establish my covenant with you. Never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of the flood. Underline that. Never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of the flood. Never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth. Verse 12. And Elohim said, this is the sign of the covenant. So stop. So if somebody asks you, if you see a quiz question that asks you, if I ask you that what is the provision of the Noahic covenant, what would you tell me? Oh my goodness. Y'all extremely quiet tonight. All right. It's all right. I will tell you the provision of the Noahic covenant, which means what makes up the Noahic covenant. Here's the Noahic covenant. Verse 11. I establish my promise with you. Stop. That's what a covenant is. The covenant in Hebrew, is a promise. How do you say covenant in Hebrew? Brit. B-R-I-T. Brit. Brit is a covenant. Brit. I establish my promise with you. What's the promise, Yah? Well, never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of a flood. Never again shall there be a flood to destroy the earth. So the Noahic covenant is a promise that Yah will never again destroy the earth by what? A flood. That's the Noahic covenant. What is the sign of the Noahic covenant? For every covenant has a sign. Abrahamic covenant of circumcision, what's the sign of the Abrahamic covenant? The sign is the circumcision, to remove the foreskin of a man's penis from the penis. That's the sign of the Abrahamic covenant. What's the sign of the covenant between Yah and Israel? The sign of the covenant between us and Yah is the Shabbat. That's the sign of the covenant between us and Yahweh. So what is the sign of the Noahic covenant? The sign of the Noahic covenant is this. This is the sign of the covenant which I make between me and you and every creature that is with you for the perpetual generation. I set my rainbow in the clouds, and it shall be for a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. So if you see a question, a quiz question, a pop quiz question, if you're teaching somebody else this, and you are asked or you are telling them what is the sign of the Noahic covenant, your answer is the sign of the Noahic covenant is what?
The rainbow.
The rainbow. So it's outside storming in Chicago, it's raining, it's storming up there in Canada, wherever you all are. It's storming in Ohio, it's storming in Texas, storming down in Louisiana, wherever it's storming. And after the storm, sometimes during the storm, if you look up in the sky, right when the sun begins to appear, you will see the rainbow. And it is a sign, and that sign is Yah promises never again to destroy this earth by a flood to consume all the flesh. Now, you're going to have your tsunamis because they're coming. You had a tsunami in 2004 in Sri Lanka. 275,000 people were washed away in that flood. The provision said that he would never destroy all flesh upon the face of the earth. There are tsunamis that are coming to this earth. There is volcanic and seismic activity around the Great Fire Reef that stretches from South America, moves up through Chile, comes up through Central America, traverses around the west coast of the United States, goes under the ocean floor of the Pacific into the realm of Japan, down by the Philippines, and into Sri Lanka again. And every day there's volcanic and seismic activity. They are due for a cataclysmic tsunami. The New Madrid Fault in the Midwest, the San Andreas Fault, all are indication of something that is forthcoming of biblical proportions. Let me give me a moment. One moment, please.
Sorry.
Slicka. Excuse me. We are looking for something to occur of biblical proportions that's forthcoming. Let us continue. Verse 14, it shall be that when I bring the clouds over the earth, and the rainbow shall be seen in the cloud, and then I will remember my covenant, which is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh, that the waters shall never again become a flood to destroy all flesh, all flesh. And the rainbow shall be in the cloud. And I will look on it to remember the everlasting covenant between Elohim and every living creature of all flesh that is on the earth. And Elohim said to Noah, this is the sign of the covenant which I have established between me and all flesh that is on the earth. And now the sons of Noah who went out of the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And Ham was the father of Canaan. And these were the sons of Noah. And from these the whole earth was populated. And Noah began to be a farmer, or being a farmer, he planted a vineyard. And then he drank the wine, and he was drunk and became uncovered in his tent. Now pay very close attention to this next series of verses here. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father, and told his two brothers outside, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Let me pause again. Let me reread that. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his two brothers outside. But Shem, Ham, and Japheth, or rather Shem and Japheth, took a garment and laid it on both their shoulders and went backwards and covered the nakedness of their father. Their faces were turned away, and they did not see their father's nakedness. So Noah awoke from his wine and knew what his younger son had done to him. And then he said, Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants he shall be to his brethren. And he said, Baruch le Yahweh, blessed be Yahweh, the Elohim of Shem, and may Canaan be his servant. And may Yahweh enlarge Japheth, and may he dwell in the tents of Shem, and Canaan be his servant. And Noah lived after the flood 350 years. That's a long time. 350 years. And so all the days of Noah were 950 years, and he died. Now let's pause for a minute here before we go into chapter 10 and conclude for this evening. All right, because we've got about good 40 minutes here. So let's kind of look at something here back. Because I want to make sure the saints of the Most High have a real understanding of this. And we're going to look at verse 16 of the 9th chapter. And it speaks on this wise. The rainbow shall be in the cloud, and I will look on it to remember the everlasting covenant between Elohim and every living creature of all flesh that is on the earth. So now let me say this to you about this is the Noahic covenant. Now, write this down on the notepad somewhere. Write this down and you keep this as a reference, because you're going, as you go through the Genesis, right, when we get to the book of Exodus, when we get to the books of Numbers, you're going to go through different covenants. So we just came across the Noahic covenant. So what two covenants did we read about from Genesis 1 up through Genesis 5, because we started this in Genesis 6 tonight, have we read about before? Anybody know? Okay.
The Noahic covenant, and was it the Adamic covenant?
Right. So you've got two other covenants that precede the Noahic covenant. The first one is the Edenic covenant, and that was the promises that was given in Gan Eden. And then the second one is the Adamic covenant. That was the promises that were given to Adam and Eve, or Adam and Hawa. And now the third covenant, this is the third covenant. So you might see something that says, which is the third covenant of the Bible? And so the third covenant is the Noahic covenant. And so now the Noahic covenant has provisions in it. And then it has a prophetic declaration in it. And the Noahic covenant is broken down into parts. So sometime between now and next week, before we go into Genesis 11 through 15, you're going to get a study guide that deals with the covenant. So why? Because it's important for you to know the covenant. Why? Because the covenants point to the established promises of the Creator, and as you go through the covenants, you'll see that we are leaving, we're in the Abrahamic covenant, which is still in existence, but we've gone through the Mosaic covenant, right? And so the Mosaic covenant is the fifth covenant, and then you get to the sixth covenant, which is the Davidic covenant. And so we've got to find, as we go through all this, whatever covenant is the covenant that's coming that we all are going to be the recipients of. And that is a covenant that is going to be instituted in the days of the Messiah. But I have to walk you through this and not run you through this as others run folk through scriptures, because I want you to have the proper spiritual and biblically fundamental understanding of how this is supposed to work, from how the Creator set it up. And oftentimes, leadership is who I would hold responsible, which means I hold myself responsible also, being a member of Israelite leadership. Leadership sometimes does not want to take the time and make sure you all understand what's going on. Y'all all right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So now we're going to start changing some of these English words around, right? So I say, y'all all right? And y'all saying, yeah. So the Hebrew word for yes is Cain. Cain. So,
Cain?
Cain. K-A-Y-N. And some write it K-A-N-E. And some write it K-A-N. And whatever you're comfortable with pronouncing, as long as it comes out with a Hebrew affirmative for yes, which is Cain, then it's all right. So I'm going to make sure y'all kol beseder. All is in order. That means all right. So it's all right. Let's go into chapter 10. Now you're going to really have to get your pens out, because you're going to do a lot of writing if you haven't. And if you're good and you feel comfortable with circling, we're just going to write, and we're going to circle, and we're going to point out. And there's only 20 some verses we're going to hit a key verse, but then we're going to focus on verses that identify, because we're going into the Noahic family, and we're getting ready to deal with the table of nations. We're going into Genesis chapter 10. So please make sure you are paying very close attention, because a lot of folks don't like to go into this chapter, and it's a much-needed chapter if you're going to understand who is who on the face of Yah's earth as we go into chapter 10. And I read, and it speaks on this wise. This is the genealogy of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Are Gomer, Magog, Madi, Javan, Tubal,